The Illusion of Strength. May 10, 1940. 4:35 a.m. The Ardennes Forest, on the border of Belgium and Luxembourg. A low mist clings to the trees, thick and unmoving. Somewhere in the darkness, an engine turns over. Then another, and another. The sound doesn't echo, it swallows itself in the forest, muffled by pine and damp earth. But if you're standing near the French listening post outside Sedan, you feel it before you hear it. A vibration, a tremor in the ground beneath your boots. Private Marcel Duret of the 147th Fortress Infantry Regiment shifts his rifle and scans the tree line. He has been told the Ardennes are impassable to tanks. Too dense, too wild. The generals in Paris have said so for years. Behind him, miles of reinforced concrete and steel stretch across eastern France. The pride of the nation, the Maginot Line. Underground railways. Rotating gun turrets. Artillery bunkers with walls thicker than a man is tall. It is supposed to be impenetrable, a wall against another German invasion. But the Maginot Line does not extend here. Here, the forest itself is meant to be the barrier. At 4:37 a.m., the sky tears open. German aircraft scream overhead, low, fast, merciless. The Luftwaffe begins its assault, not on the great forts of the Maginot, but on the thinly defended crossings along the Meuse River. The bombs fall in staggered patterns, walking across the ridgelines. Earth erupts. Telephone wires snap. Bunkers vanish in fountains of smoke and splintered wood. This is not a probing attack. It is a spear thrust. Hundreds of miles away, in a command vehicle moving steadily west, General Oberst Heinz Guderian studies his watch. His 19th Panzer Corps has been moving for days. Thousands of vehicles threading through narrow Ardennes roads in a traffic jam that stretches over 150 miles. Tanks nose to tail. Fuel trucks. Motorcycles. Artillery. If French reconnaissance aircraft had spotted them en masse, the column could have been annihilated. But French command never believed armor could move this fast through this terrain. Guderian knows the risk. He also knows the reward. The plan is audacious. Bypass the Maginot Line entirely, slice through the Ardennes, cross the Meuse at Sedan, and drive straight to the English Channel. Cut the Allied armies in half before they understand what is happening. Speed. Shock. Ruthless coordination. Blitzkrieg. Back at Sedan, Captain Pierre Lafont grips the field telephone inside his command bunker. The line crackles. Reports flood in. Bridges hit. Artillery positions destroyed. Airfields burning. He requests reinforcements. Air support. Anything. The response is delayed. Confused. Paris still believes the main German attack is coming further north, through Belgium, just as it had in 1914. They are preparing to fight the last war. By mid-morning, German Stuka dive bombers are plunging from the clouds with sirens wailing, a mechanical shriek designed to freeze the blood. French troops along the Meuse flatten against trench walls as explosions hammer their positions for hours. Not minutes. Hours. You can almost feel the concussion in your chest. The helplessness of waiting for something you cannot shoot down. When the bombing stops, the silence is worse. Then the engineers move in. Rubber boats slide into the Meuse under cover of smoke. German infantry paddle hard against the current. French machine guns open fire, but many crews are dazed, shaken, their communications severed. Some positions never receive the order to fire at all. By nightfall on May 10th, German units have secured small bridgeheads on the western bank. Small, fragile, but real. Inside the French High Command, arguments erupt. Is this the main thrust? Or a diversion? Intelligence is contradictory. The forest was supposed to protect them. The Maginot Line was supposed to anchor them. Yet here, at Sedan, the line bends. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the river, the rumble of tanks grows louder. In just 24 hours, the impassable forest has become a corridor. And this is only the beginning. 2. The break at Sedan. May 13, 1940. 3 p.m. The west bank of the Meuse, near Sedan. The air smells like cordite and churned mud. Smoke drifts low across the ridgelines, turning the afternoon sun into a dull red smear. For 3 days, the French 55th Infantry Division has endured bombing so relentless that some men no longer flinch when shells land nearby. They simply stare, hollow-eyed, exhausted. Then the artillery begins. Not scattered fire, not probing rounds. A wall of steel. German guns unleash a coordinated barrage, timed to the second. High-explosive shells crash into French trenches and strongpoints, pulverizing sandbags, snapping tree trunks like matchsticks. The ground shakes continuously, not in bursts, but in a sustained roar. You can almost feel your teeth rattle. In forward observation posts, French officers try to respond. Many can't reach headquarters. Telephone lines were severed days ago. Runners are sent through open terrain, some never return. Across the river, General Oberst Heinz Guderian stands near a forward command vehicle, binoculars raised. He doesn't blink. He has pushed his men through the Ardennes faster than Berlin thought possible. Now comes the gamble. He turns to his staff. Panzer forward. The order ripples outward. German assault engineers throw additional pontoon bridges across the Meuse under covering fire. Infantry who secured the fragile bridgeheads now surge inland, attacking French positions from the flank and rear. It is coordinated chaos, dive bombers screaming down in tight arcs while artillery shifts its fire in creeping lines ahead of advancing troops. This is not the slow grind of trench warfare. This is motion. In a bunker overlooking the Sedan sector, Colonel Charles Huntsiger of the French Second Army listens to fragmented reports. Entire companies are withdrawing without orders. Some units report German tanks already beyond the initial defensive belt. Impossible, he thinks. The river crossing happened only hours ago. But it's not impossible. The 55th Division is composed largely of reservists, older men, many veterans of the last war. Brave, yes, but not prepared for this tempo. Not prepared for an enemy who doesn't pause to consolidate. By evening, cracks widen. A French artillery battery abandons its guns after Stuka's bombed their position repeatedly. Infantry platoons fall back in confusion, believing they are being outflanked. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're not. Fear moves faster than facts. You can see it ripple through the lines like a shockwave. At 7:30 p.m., German Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks begin crossing the hastily assembled bridges. Engines roar as steel tracks grind over wet planks. One bridge buckles under weight, but holds. Tank after tank rolls across. Once on the western bank, they don't stop. They accelerate. Guderian had been instructed to secure the bridgehead and wait for infantry to consolidate. Instead, he pushes forward. Aggressively. Recklessly, some would say. He senses the French are disoriented. If he pauses now, they will recover. So he gambles everything on speed. That night, French command receives alarming intelligence. Armored columns are advancing rapidly toward Bulsen Ridge. If the Germans seize the high ground, Sedan's defenses will collapse entirely. General Maurice Gamelin, commander-in-chief in Paris, is slow to grasp the scale. Reports are conflicting. The main Allied armies have already marched into Belgium to meet what they believed was the primary German assault. The best French divisions are moving north, away from Sedan, away from the real breakthrough. In the darkness near Bulsen, scattered French units attempt to form a defensive line. But coordination is breaking down. Some soldiers retreat at the mere rumor of tanks. Others hold firm, unaware they have been flanked. Shortly before midnight, German armor crests the ridge. From that vantage point, the road west lies open. In less than 48 hours, what was meant to be a contained river crossing has become a rupture, a widening tear in France's defensive fabric. And now, nothing stands between Guderian's panzers and the open plains beyond. The question is no longer whether the line will bend. It's how far it will break. The race to the Channel. May 15, 1940. 6:20 a.m. west of Sedan, near Montcornet. Dawn breaks over open farmland. Wide fields, scattered hedgerows, narrow country roads still damp from the night air. It looks peaceful. Deceptively so. Then the horizon begins to move. At first, it's just a shimmer of heat and dust. Then the shapes resolve. Dark silhouettes rolling forward in tight formation. Tanks. Dozens of them. Behind them, armored cars and half-tracks packed with infantry. Motorcycles weaving between columns like messengers of momentum. The 19 Panzer Corps is no longer probing. It is sprinting. Inside one of the lead Panzer III tanks, a young German lieutenant wipes condensation from his periscope. The order from General Oberst Heinz Guderian is clear. Advance without delay. Do not wait for the slower infantry divisions. Do not stop to eliminate every pocket of resistance. Bypass. Encircle. Keep moving west. The radio crackles constantly. Short commands. Grid coordinates. Reports of French units collapsing ahead. Speed is their armor now. Back in Paris, Prime Minister Paul Reynaud grips the edge of a conference table. He has just spoken with General Winston Churchill in London. The words Reynaud repeats are almost surreal. They have broken through. Churchill is stunned. The French army was considered the strongest in Europe. The Maginot Line was supposed to anchor the defense. The Ardennes were considered impassable to mass armor. Yet within 72 hours, German tanks are pouring through a gap that should not exist. In the field, French officers attempt desperate counterattacks. Near Montcornet, Colonel Charles de Gaulle, still relatively unknown, rallies elements of the 4th Armored Division. He orders an immediate strike against advancing German units. For a brief moment, it works. French Char B-1 heavy tanks rumble forward, their thick armor shrugging off some German anti-tank fire. Several Panzer units are caught off guard. Columns scatter. Fuel trucks burn along the roadside. You can almost sense the flicker of hope. But de Gaulle lacks air support. He lacks numbers. And most critically, he lacks coordination with the rest of the French command structure. His attack is isolated, a local success in a rapidly expanding disaster. German aircraft soon arrive. Stukas dive again, sirens wailing, bombs tearing into French armor. By nightfall, de Gaulle's forces are forced to withdraw. The German spearhead never truly stops. Villages fall in hours. Bridges are seized before they can be demolished. French refugees flood the roads. Carts, bicycles, children clutching bundles of clothes. Civilians move west in growing panic, clogging highways and unintentionally slowing military movements behind them. And still, the panzers push on. By May 17th, German units have advanced nearly 60 miles beyond Sedan. Supply lines stretch dangerously thin. Fuel becomes a constant concern. Some German commanders urge caution, consolidate, secure the flanks. Guderian refuses to slow. He understands something crucial. The Allies still believe this is a secondary thrust. The main Allied forces, British Expeditionary Force and French First Army, remain far to the north in Belgium. They are moving deeper into a trap that is closing behind them. On May 20th, at approximately 7:30 p.m., advance elements of the 2nd Panzer Division reach the cliffs overlooking the English Channel near Abbeville. The sea is gray and endless. For a moment, German soldiers simply stare at it. They have done it. In 10 days, they have cut across France like a blade. The Allied armies in Belgium are now isolated. Their supply lines severed, their retreat routes collapsing. Nearly 400,000 troops are trapped in a tightening pocket near the coast. All because a defensive line, believed unbreakable, collapsed in just 72 hours. But what happens next will decide whether this breakthrough becomes total annihilation or something else entirely. The aftermath of collapse. May 21st, 1940. 10 a.m. Northern France, near Amiens. The roads are clogged. Not with tanks this time, but with retreating soldiers. French infantry, British Expeditionary Force units, and scattered Belgian troops move like a swollen river, ragged, exhausted, desperate to find safety. Dust from the churned roads mixes with smoke from burning villages and smoldering vehicles. The air tastes metallic, tinged with fear. Colonel Charles de Gaulle rides atop a half-track, shouting orders that few hear over the chaos. Radio communication is almost non-existent. Messengers struggle to navigate roads choked with men and material. Entire battalions have vanished. Equipment is abandoned in fields. The morale of the army is fraying faster than the soldiers' boots. Behind them, the German advance continues almost unopposed. Blitzkrieg has become a law of motion, fast, brutal, and unrelenting. Panzer divisions slice through rearguard positions with surgical precision, forcing defenders to scatter or surrender. The Luftwaffe dominates the skies, targeting any semblance of organized retreat. Tanks, artillery, and infantry move in tandem like a machine well-oiled for destruction. In Paris, General Maurice Gamelin attempts to rally the French command. Orders are issued, divisions are redirected, but the situation is already past the tipping point. Communications between units are sporadic at best. Strategic positions are overrun before reinforcements arrive. The Maginot Line, still largely intact, now serves as a cold monument to misjudgment. a defensive symbol that could not protect the heart of France. At Sedan, Private Marcel Duret, who witnessed the first bombs fall, is now part of a chaotic withdrawal. He watches the horizon, seeing the gray dust clouds of German armor in the distance. He knows the line has failed, that the defenses meant to anchor France are gone, and that retreat is the only option. He thinks of his comrades left behind, and the dread is suffocating. Meanwhile, General Oberst Heinz Guderian coordinates logistics for the next push. His units are tired, fuel is limited, and roads are congested with both military and civilian traffic. Yet he does not pause. Speed is still the weapon. He senses that hesitation will allow the Allies to regroup, and that is the only chance they have left. Reports from captured officers reveal the depth of the French disarray. Entire corps have been encircled, command structures disrupted, and frontline cohesion shattered. German intelligence documents the speed and effectiveness of their own breakthrough, a feat that would be studied for decades. But among the victors, there is no time for celebration. Blitzkrieg is unforgiving. A single misstep, a delayed bridge, a jammed supply convoy, and the unstoppable momentum could falter. Guderian's men push onward, knowing that their success depends on maintaining relentless pressure. By the evening of May 21st, the first signs of Allied desperation are visible in towns and villages. Civilians flee in panic, sometimes colliding with retreating soldiers. French gendarmes attempt to maintain order, but there are too many people, too many guns, too much fear. Chaos reigns, and the collapse of Sedan has created not just a military disaster, but a humanitarian crisis. From the perspective of the German High Command, the breakthrough represents more than a tactical victory. It is the embodiment of a new form of warfare, where mobility, coordination, and audacity replace static defense. For France, it is a nightmare realized. A line that was supposed to hold for months, perhaps years, has fallen in just 72 hours. And yet, even in the midst of this calamity, some pockets of resistance endure. Small groups of French and British troops regroup to delay the German advance. These desperate rearguard actions will become legends, a flicker of hope in a rapidly darkening landscape. But the question lingers over northern France. Can the remnants of an army recover from a collapse this complete? Or is the fall of Sedan only the first chapter in a story of total defeat? The human cost. May 22, 1940. The roads between Amiens and Abbeville. The sun beats down on a landscape scarred by war. Smoke still curls from shell-pocked fields and shattered homes the countryside. Refugees move in long, snaking lines, families carrying what little they can salvage. You can hear the cries of children, the groans of wounded soldiers, and the constant rumble of tanks in the distance. It is a river of despair flowing westward. Sergeant Jacques Fournier of the French 3rd Infantry Division walks along the road, rifle slung over his shoulder. His unit is in fragments. Friends he trained with for years have vanished, either killed, captured, or lost in the chaos. Every village they pass is eerily quiet, the silence broken only by distant artillery and the occasional shout. The morale of men who believed in the Maginot Line has been shattered, replaced by fear and disbelief. Meanwhile, German officers report an almost surreal scene. The advance is faster than anticipated. Supplies are stretched thin. Roads are clogged with both retreating soldiers and civilians. Yet their momentum is relentless. Blitzkrieg, as Guderian intended, has created panic and confusion that multiplies the effect of every gun and tank. One misstep by the Allies, and an entire formation collapses, not because of superior firepower, but because fear travels faster than strategy. At a small farmhouse, Lieutenant Karl Weber of the 1st Panzer Division pauses to observe the refugees. He notes the desperation in their eyes, the exhaustion etched on faces of both soldiers and civilians. Some of the men on the French side attempt to resist, but too often, they are cut down or forced to retreat. You can feel the weight of survival pressing down on everyone in this corridor of chaos. By midday, reports from the British Expeditionary Force trickle in. The BEF is attempting to form a defensive line near Abbeville, but the units are scattered and exhausted. Supplies are limited, communication lines fractured. Rearguard actions are heroic, but the scale of the collapse is staggering. It is no longer a question of winning the battle at Sedan. It is a question of whether the Allied forces can prevent a total encirclement. Even in Paris, the gravity of the situation begins to sink in. Prime Minister Paul Reynaud meets with his generals in frantic conferences, attempting to redirect units to form new lines of defense. Yet every measure seems reactive, always one step behind the German advance. News from Sedan and Montcornet confirms the fear. In just 3 days, the defensive line that was supposed to hold has fallen, and the psychological shock reverberates throughout the French army. Amidst this, smaller stories of courage emerge. Soldiers who refuse to surrender, civilians hiding families from the advancing troops, and French officers leading desperate counterattacks. These acts are fleeting, often swallowed by the enormity of the collapse, but they are the human heartbeat in a mechanized war of unprecedented speed. By nightfall, the Germans control key junctions and roads leading toward the Channel. The Allies are in disarray, and the collapse of Sedan has proven that no fortress, no matter how imposing, can withstand the combination of surprise, speed, and ruthlessness. For France, the consequences are catastrophic. For the German high command, the advance has created the possibility of encirclement on a scale no one expected. And yet, in the darkness of that May night, one question haunts the soldiers and commanders alike. How quickly can fear spread, and how far can a single breakthrough carry an army before the consequences become irreversible? The domino effect. May 23, 1940. Northern France, between Abbeville and Arras. The morning fog sits low over the fields, masking what is rapidly becoming a nightmare for the Allies. From the air, it seems almost poetic. Columns of German tanks slicing through hedgerows, infantry streaming behind, and Stuka dive bombers screaming overhead, their sirens a mechanical wail that chills the spine. But on the ground, the scene is pure chaos. Roads are clogged with retreating French and British units, civilians fleeing, abandoned vehicles, and burned-out tanks. Every mile forward is a mile into uncertainty. Colonel Charles de Gaulle coordinates what remains of his armored units. The Char B-1s are battered, fuel is dwindling, and radio contact with higher command is nearly non-existent. Yet de Gaulle pushes forward, attempting to stabilize a collapsing front. He orders small counterattacks to delay the German advance, hitting isolated Panzer units, creating momentary confusion. The attacks are brave, almost cinematic, tanks plunging through hedgerows, machine guns rattling, shells exploding in clouds of dirt. But courage alone cannot stop a tide of this magnitude. Meanwhile, General Oberst Heinz Guderian rides in his command half-track, eyes scanning maps, and watching the German advance unfold. His audacity has paid off. The Allies are fractured, their defensive strategy obsolete, and every hour of delay they suffer increases the potential for a full encirclement. Supply lines are stretched dangerously thin, but he knows speed is the weapon. Hesitation would give the Allies a chance to regroup, a luxury they cannot afford. The collapse at Sedan has triggered a domino effect. French units north and south are now withdrawing to avoid encirclement, leaving entire sectors undefended. Panic spreads faster than orders, morale crumbles, and the chain of command struggles to maintain cohesion. Officers shout instructions that are either ignored or cannot reach their men. The battlefield is fragmented, chaotic, a reflection of fear as much as strategy. In Amiens, refugees pile into abandoned trains, trying to escape westward. Families clutch children, soldiers clutch weapons, and the constant roar of engines and artillery underscores the fragility of human organization in the face of speed and surprise. You can feel the tension in the air, the way people flinch at every shadow, every sound. Survival has become instinct, overriding duty and reason. Back at Arras, remnants of the British Expeditionary Force attempt to dig in. Machine guns rattle, artillery fires, and the last coordinated counterattacks push German armor back temporarily. But these are isolated victories, temporary flashes in a collapsing theater. The Germans adapt instantly, shifting columns, sending in mobile units to outflank, always keeping the pressure on. By nightfall, the pattern is unmistakable. Wherever the French line bends, the German advance stretches. The dominoes fall faster than reinforcements can arrive. The Maginot Line, once a symbol of impregnable defense, now seems like a relic from a past era. Sedan is not just a tactical failure, it is a psychological one. Fear has multiplied faster than bullets, and the army that was supposed to hold the line is now scattered, reactive, and in disarray. The Allies face a stark realization: the collapse is no longer localized. It is systemic. If the dominoes continue to fall, northern France could be lost entirely within days. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Guderian's tanks continue their relentless push west. The engine roar a grim countdown to the encirclement that will define the campaign. Encirclement approaches. May 24, 1940. The Somme region, near Abbeville. The first light of day cuts through mist and smoke, illuminating a landscape that seems more battlefield than countryside. Roads are choked with retreating troops, abandoned vehicles, and refugees carrying whatever they can salvage. Every mile west is a mile closer to the coast, and every mile closer, the noose tightens. Lieutenant Karl Weber of the 1st Panzer Division drives his reconnaissance half-track along a narrow road. Ahead, the villages are abandoned, the streets littered with broken carts and bodies, both human and equine. The silence is eerie, broken only by the distant rumble of tanks and the occasional staccato of machine gun fire. He writes notes in his log. Enemy disorganized, morale low, movement westward chaotic. No coherent resistance. French command is scrambling. General Maurice Gamelin has issued orders for a counteroffensive at Arras, hoping to slow the German advance and prevent encirclement of the British Expeditionary Force. In practice, the attack is a patchwork of units thrown together with little coordination. Communication lines are disrupted, and fuel shortages limit mobility. Still, some pockets of resistance fight fiercely, buying hours of delay at great cost. Colonel Charles de Gaulle, still in the field with a few armored units, coordinates one of these desperate strikes. Char B-1s roar through hedgerows, smashing lightly defended German positions, creating brief but vivid confusion in the German ranks. Stuka dive bombers retaliate, screaming downward with deadly precision. Smoke and dust mingle with the cries of men. It is chaos made cinematic, yet heroic, a fleeting glimmer of hope in a collapsing front. But the gap at Sedan is no longer just a breach, it is a corridor of death. German panzer divisions pour through the Ardennes, advancing with unstoppable momentum. The 19 Corps pushes forward relentlessly, stretching Allied lines to the breaking point. In less than 2 weeks, the Germans have advanced nearly 200 miles into France, a distance previously thought impossible given terrain and resistance. Refugees clog roads that are meant for retreating armies. Civilians and soldiers collide, confusion multiplies, and the logistical nightmare grows. Field hospitals are overwhelmed. Ammunition and medical supplies cannot reach the front lines in time. You can almost feel the fear radiating along every column, a palpable tension heavier than any shell. By nightfall, German units reach the outskirts of Abbeville. From this vantage, the channel lies open, the western escape route blocked. The British Expeditionary Force and remaining French units are trapped in what will become the infamous Dunkirk pocket. Their only hope is to hold what little ground remains while evacuation plans are hastily prepared. In Paris, panic and disbelief dominate the command rooms. The fall of Sedan in just 72 hours has set off a chain reaction that no amount of reinforcements or strategic brilliance can fully contain. France faces not just a military disaster, but a national catastrophe. And yet, amid this chaos, a daring question emerges. Can an army trapped against the sea turn disaster into survival? Or will the collapse at Sedan define the end of a nation's fighting spirit? The edge of disaster. May 26, 1940. Dunkirk, northern France. The beaches stretch endlessly under a gray, cold sky. Waves lap quietly at the sand, but the air is alive with tension. You can hear the distant thunder of artillery, the shriek of dive bombers overhead, and the low growl of engines on the roads leading to the coast. It is a chaotic orchestra of desperation. British soldiers move in organized chaos, trying to form lines while clearing civilians from the beaches. French troops, exhausted and demoralized, stumble across the sand, many without weapons or orders. The collapse at Sedan has reached its ultimate consequence. The Allies are trapped against the channel. Retreat is impossible without sea evacuation, and for many, survival depends on luck as much as strategy. In the command tent, Admiral Bertram Ramsay directs naval coordination for Operation Dynamo, the evacuation of the BEF. Ships, destroyers, and even civilian vessels are summoned to ferry troops across the channel. Every moment counts. Every delay risks annihilation. You can almost feel the pressure in the room. Men sweating, maps spread across tables, telephones ringing incessantly. On the northern front, German commanders relish the situation. Panzer divisions, still fresh from the rapid advance through Sedan and beyond, cut off roads and capture key towns. The 19th Corps pushes to seal the encirclement. Yet even they know time is precious. The longer the Allies hold the beaches, the more difficult it will be to finish what began at Sedan. Blitzkrieg has carried them far, but logistics are stretched thin. Fuel, ammunition, and maintenance are critical vulnerabilities. Colonel Charles de Gaulle, among the French units holding rearguard positions, watches as German armor edges closer. He organizes small, desperate counterattacks, tanks against tanks, infantry assaults under fire. Each engagement slows the enemy slightly, but cannot stop the inevitable. Soldiers shout orders, shells explode in the fields behind them, and the wind carries the acrid smell of smoke and cordite. Meanwhile, civilians on the beaches watch, helpless, as armies collide. Families clutch children. Elderly men and women pray. Dogs yelp. The chaos of the Sedan collapse has now become a humanitarian nightmare, visible in every face, every desperate movement along the sand. By late afternoon, the first troops begin boarding ships. The sense of relief is mixed with fear. Will everyone get off? Will the rearguards hold long enough? The collapse at Sedan, once a distant horror, has now funneled hundreds of thousands of men and women into a precarious lifeline. As darkness falls over Dunkirk, the roar of German engines fades temporarily, but the danger is far from over. The rapid fall of Sedan created a domino effect that led to the evacuation beaches. Without it, there would have been no corridor to the channel, no frantic rescue, no Operation Dynamo. And yet, in the shadow of the sea and the collapse that began just 72 hours earlier, one terrifying question remains. Could the Allies turn retreat into survival, or would the fall of Sedan mark the beginning of France's final surrender? Lessons of a line that failed. May 28, 1940. Dunkirk, the beaches and evacuation piers. The evacuation is underway. Ships line the horizon like a lifeline stretching into the gray sea. Soldiers climb ladders and gangplanks, some helping the wounded, others carrying what weapons and supplies they can manage. The roar of engines, the whistle of artillery in the distance, and the occasional scream of a dive bomber remind everyone that the danger is far from over. Every moment is a negotiation between survival and annihilation. Colonel Charles de Gaulle watches from a dune, noting the tireless coordination of the evacuation. Despite exhaustion, disorganization, and the psychological shock of Sedan's collapse, small units are holding positions just long enough for their comrades to escape. He sees bravery in the chaos, courage born not of certainty, but of necessity. The same spirit that was missing in the fractured defense at Sedan is now the fragile thread keeping hundreds of thousands alive. Across the Channel, in London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill receives reports from the front. He understands that the speed and audacity of the German advance, the Blitzkrieg that shattered Sedan's defensive line in 72 hours, has forced a complete reevaluation of military strategy. France's failure wasn't just the result of poor planning. It was the product of overconfidence, rigid thinking, and an underestimation of mobility, surprise, and psychological warfare. Guderian's success underscores the power of initiative. By striking through what was considered impassable terrain, bypassing static defenses, and keeping momentum, the Germans have redefined what modern warfare can accomplish. But even Guderian recognizes the fragility of the advance. Overextended supply lines, exhausted troops, and unpredictable terrain mean that success depends on relentless pressure and calculated risk. Meanwhile, on the beaches of Dunkirk, the human cost of Sedan's collapse is undeniable. Thousands of soldiers have been killed, wounded, or captured. Families are uprooted, villages destroyed, and an entire national army teeters on the brink of surrender. Yet, The evacuation offers a glimmer of hope, not just survival, but a chance to fight another day, to learn from mistakes, and to rebuild. Sedan became more than a tactical defeat. It became a lesson in the perils of underestimating speed, flexibility, and morale. The collapse in just 72 hours exposed flaws in communication, command, and confidence, proving that even the strongest fortifications cannot replace adaptability and awareness. As night falls, the last ships depart Dunkirk. Smoke from burning vehicles and artillery fire mingles with the salty sea air. Soldiers look back toward the French coastline, battered, scarred, uncertain, and understand that the fall of Sedan has changed everything. Not just the map, not just the strategy, but the very psychology of the war. And as the engines hum across the channel, one thought hangs over both the victors and the survivors. A line, no matter how strong on paper, can crumble in hours if it is unprepared for speed, audacity, and the human element of war. The echoes of those 72 hours at Sedan would be studied, feared, and remembered for generations, a warning of how quickly the impossible can become reality.